Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Adventures in Collecting.
Hi.
Dave, we are back. We have an exciting guest joining us for the show this week.
Yeah.
A new friend of the pod. We're
Yes.
adding collecting new friends.
I'm happy. I am way more less hoarse than I was yesterday. From
Yeah.
Boston.
How you had a nice trip? Got to see
Yeah.
some New England punk rock
I got to see some
and
punk
some New
rock
Jersey
from
punk
all
rock.
over. Yeah, New
Yeah.
Jersey, New England, Pennsylvania, Delaware.
Very, very cool. Yeah. Repping
I don't know. Oh,
the Vinyl Addiction
Michigan.
Records shirt too.
Yeah. Shouts to Dave, Doug, and Pete.
Yeah, but before we hop into introducing our guest here, couple little housekeeping things to take care of.
Mm-hmm.
So, first and foremost, Zapp Con
Yeah.
is rapidly approaching. So, um, March 29th at the Wayne PAL, beginning at 10 a.m. Zapp Con opens to the public. It is an awesome local con. So lots of really
Yeah.
cool artists. There's going to be tons of stuff to buy. Comic books, of course, it's hosted by our favorite comic book shop, Zapp Comics in Wayne, New
Yeah.
Jersey.
In
So
Wayne,
they're
New
the
Jersey.
hosts. This is ZappCon 6. And we will be recording our second ever live and in-person show. So if you've been listening to the show for a while, you've heard us plug this extensively. I
Mm-hmm.
promise the run is almost over. We're
I got
almost,
my hair cut for Zapp Con, even though it's like a week and a half away.
but we will be hosting a live show with friends of the pod, Chris Ramo and Blaine Roddenbaugh, of course, of NECA. Chris will be set up there with his own booth, his own table, selling his incredible art. If you love tiki inspired art and horror design and Disney, Chris has a little bit of everything for you.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll be interviewing Chris and Blaine from NECA, and it'll be really interesting because it's the first time that we've ever had somebody from the product end and from the packaging end at the same company on the pod at the same time. So
Yeah.
it's going to give us a really cool opportunity to take everybody through kind of the creation process from initial sketches all the way through to product on shelf. So
Yeah, Blaine will be hanging out with us at our table if you want to say hi.
yep.
And
Yep, and there may even be some new NECA stuff on display, some stuff that maybe we got a chance to see at Toy Fair, and maybe it'll be on display. So we also have a couple of giveaways. So if you are in the audience at the time of recording, which is at 4 p.m. Eastern time, we will be giving out some prizes, maybe to folks who ask questions during the Q&A section. I think that's a pretty con standard thing, right? So yes, that's March 29th. ZappConNJ.com to get your tickets, or visit either Zapp Comics in Manalapan or Wayne to pick up your pass. And then the other piece of housekeeping news is, of course, our March 2025 giveaway. There is still time to enter. You have until 11:59 p.m. Eastern time on March 31st to get your entry in. But you can enter to win this gorgeous PVC diorama from our friends at Diamond Select Toys of Bryan Danielson, AEW icon, pro wrestling great, the American Dragon. Legend of the ring. So you can get this awesome PVC diorama statue. I think it's like 1/6 scale, somewhere around there. He's big. It's a big boy.
yeah.
But you will enjoy this as a wrestling collector. You will enjoy having this on your shelf. So you can head over to our Instagram. That's at AIC_podcast, and you will find this post pinned where you can enter to win this. So you have until March to get your entry in. Go and do it.
Oh, make sure to follow the rules too, because you won't win if you don't.
Yeah, the rules are there. So read the rules, follow all of them.
We'd hate to like, say people cannot partake, but you do need to follow the rules. Like there's
much like life, there are
yeah.
there are rules. So with that takes care of our housekeeping and brings us to our first of a few traditions on the pod, which is Dave, what I think I'm done burying the lead at this
Yes,
point.
you
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've stopped.
I've
Or
stopped.
yeah.
So we're gonna intro our guest here. Really excited. When you think of independent toy makers who have not only shaped the collector space, but also redefined what's possible in action figures, Four Horsemen Studios is a name that stands at the top. From their early days working on some of the most iconic toy lines in history to building their own powerhouse properties like Mythic Legions and Cosmic Legions, they've consistently delivered some of the most exciting and innovative figures out there. And right now, they're in the midst of something legitimately massive, like 35-ish pounds of massive. Their crowdfund for Beyithirr, a towering, fire-breathing dragon that's already setting the collecting world ablaze. See what I did there?
I like that.
Little fire pun. And
Yeah.
today, for the first time ever on Adventures in Collecting, we are welcoming a member of New Jersey's own Four Horsemen Studios team to talk all about this project. Joining us is Four Horsemen Studios Director of Sales and Marketing, Jeremy Girard. Jeremy, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me. One of two members of the studio that's actually not in New Jersey.
Yes, you're repping New Jersey
Yes.
by way of Rhode Island.
That is it.
There we go. Well, thank you again so much for joining us. It's been a
Yeah.
long time coming. We've crossed paths, we've talked, we've finally gotten things together to get you on here. So
we've done the opposite. Usually we meet people on here first and then in person, but you're the rare exception of we've met you in person first.
Well, I'm happy to be there.
So before we dive into all things Four Horsemen, as this is a show about collecting, the first question that we ask all of our guests, what are you currently collecting, and what are some of your recent pickups?
So the bulk of my collecting is actually our products. I'm a huge Legions fan. That's how I started this whole journey. So I'm still as excited as any for the actual Legions product. But outside of Four Horsemen Studios, I've recently gotten absolutely hooked on the Ben Cooper Kids line from NECA.
Yeah.
Those are cool.
But man, dude, they got to slow down. Oh my goodness. Like every day I feel like I get up and there's another pre-order for 5 more figures. I have it at my house. I have them all like, I didn't open them because I really love them in package.
Yeah.
And I have them all like thumbtacked up around the corner of part of the room, and I'm quickly running out of space. So that's been the primary thing I've been picking up lately. I did just today, I got in a package with Bandai did a reproduction of, the big jumbo Shogun Warriors from like the 70s.
Yeah.
I love those things. I had a couple when I was a kid, and that's been one of the things that I've been hunting down at toy shows recently. Both Eric Treadaway from the studio and myself, every time we go to toy shows, we're hunting down Shoguns. And Bandai's doing like reissues of them. And not only are they, reissuing them, but they're doing like the Japanese versions that had all these extra parts that weren't available in the American releases.
Oh wow!
So I just got their reissue of Mazinger, and I opened it today. And it's crazy to open up a toy. I mean, it's like a 1970s toy because it's the same parts and everything, but it's absolutely factory fresh. Everything is super clean. All the missiles are there. So that was a pretty cool kind of kicking me back to my childhood moment, cracking that thing open.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Very cool.
I think so. I don't know which two are there, but Chubsy actually has 2 in the shop that he picked up at somewhere, and they're like up on like actually by the Legion stuff.
Yep.
They're up on like the top shelf. And he got them in the one day, and I happened to be in there like right after he got them, and I was like, "How the hell did you dig these up?"
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so cool to see those in person. I mean, they make well,
Yeah.
not everybody makes toys that big.
Yeah.
They're fun to hunt down. I go to a lot of toy shows, right? And the worst thing is going to a toy show and not buying any toys. But I'm at the point where I am, like, a lot of the stuff that I collect, because I do have a lot of different collections. I have, Transformers Masterpiece. I've got G.I. Joe Classified. I've got a large Marvel, Legends collection. And for most of those sets, I'm pretty much happy with where I am. I'm not adding to them these days. So when I go to toy shows, and especially when it's a lot of modern stuff, I'm not buying a lot of that. So it's been fun to go and hunt down some of this weird, wacky stuff. And Shoguns are great because they have them at most toy shows, but they're in such crazy different states of disrepair.
Yeah.
That, I've seen some that are so absolutely trashed that I absolutely don't want. So it's kind of like finding that happy medium where, okay, I don't want it mint because it's going to be way more than I want to pay, but I don't want it trashed. So finding that kind of needle in a haystack, and it's the right condition for the right price. It's given me something to hunt for when I do the shows.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it's almost like when you find the ones that are completely thrashed, they almost become sort of like art pieces, in a way. Like the patina of loved toy.
The problem though is, even when they're trashed, they're usually $200. If it was if I found one that was legit trash and it was $50, that's probably something I would buy just for the sake of what you're talking about. But for $200, I'm like, I can't bring home something that's genuinely that broken at that price.
Or even how can I clean this up and make it look somewhat presentable?
Yeah,
but for $200, that's a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, and I've had that conversation, and I now know thyself. I'm the type of person, I know this about myself, that will buy something saying, I'm going to clean this up and get some repro stickers. No, I'm not doing any of that. I'm going to get it. It's going to go wherever I put it. And I'm going to intend to do all those things. And I'm never going to actually do it. And then at some point, I'm going to find a better condition one and just say, you know what? Let me just buy that one.
Yeah. I have lived that myself. I'll tell you that much with a handful of things. So getting into you, Jeremy, what do you do at Four Horsemen Studios? And how did you make your way there?
So my title is Director of Sales and Marketing. That's my primary responsibility. So I'm in charge of all aspects of the sales and marketing. So all of the outward facing communications that you see, whether that's the website, whether that's the social media, posts and platforms, all of that is myself putting that together, writing all that content and publishing all that. I also deal with all of our retailers. So, we have a worldwide retailer network. You were talking about Zapp Con at the start of the show. Zapp is one of our retailers in New Jersey. I'm the one that interfaces with all of them to help them with their orders, to help them, understand the product. So really driving the communications and the sales and everything for Four Horsemen Studios is my primary responsibility. One of the great things is, because we are such a small company, a lot, we all kind of do multiple things. It's not so rigid. It's not this rigid corporate structure where you only do that one job that you have. So I've been fortunate that I get to actually do a lot on the creative side as well. I work very closely with Eric Treadaway. Many people who know Four Horsemen and know Mythic Legions or Legions in general, everything that we put out is sculpted by one person, which is insane when you really think about it. If you look at the body of work over the last decade for Legions, to understand that all of that was sculpted by Eric Treadaway is an incredibly impressive feat. I get to work very closely with Eric, both from the standpoint of the lore. So I write all of the content these days, whether that's the bios, whether that's the book that's coming out. All of that is content that I write in collaboration with Eric. Eric created this world. He's the one that set the parameters for the story, and now I get to go in and kind of fill in the blanks on all of that. And then I do get to do some design work on the figures as well. Again, Eric sculpts everything, but because we do so many figures that are reusing our library of parts, I really got started with this line as a customizer. That's how I came to the attention of the studio, was doing custom figures with the Legions line. So I'm used to looking at the parts and kind of thinking about what's possible with them. And that served me really well with the line itself, where there have been a number of figures, both the Legions Con exclusives, certainly, but even a number of figures in the main line that I've been able to contribute to in a meaningful way to those designs. In terms of how I got here, so I mentioned that I was a super fan of the line right from the start. I knew Four Horsemen Studios. I knew the Four Horsemen back from their time at McFarlane Toys. And then when they opened up Four Horsemen Studios, I was, one of the people on their message boards voting for the Fantastic exclusive, back in the day. And then I backed their Kickstarter for the Gothotropolis Birds, and certainly for Mythic Legions as well. So I was an original Mythic Legions Kickstarter backer. As I mentioned, I started not only collecting, but customizing them as well. And then when they did their second Kickstarter for Advent of Decay, one of the reward thresholds or rewards things you could select was an event called Intern for a Day, where basically you get to go to Four Horsemen Studios, spend the day with the studio, learning how they do what they do. So I did that. It was my first time ever at Four Horsemen Studios. Incredible experience. But even more so because when I introduced myself, they knew who I was. Like, they had seen my customs online and everything. And I kind of struck up a conversation and a bit of a friendship. So much so that about a month later, I got an email from Cornboy, one of the founders and owners, inviting me back to the studio. But this time, instead of a paid intern, I was an invited guest to be part of something they called G-Con, which was an event. This was back before COVID, before doing virtual broadcasts were something everyone did. It was something that they wanted to do in order to show off a new wave. Instead of going out to San Diego, which is a very expensive endeavor for the studio, they were like, you know what, let's bring our friends to us. Let's broadcast this on our social channels, and we'll reveal a new wave. And I got to go and be one of the guests that they interviewed, and I got to show off my customs. That just solidified our relationship to the point where eventually I was talking with one of the other founders and owners, Jim Preziosi, and he asked me what I did for a living. And when I told him I did, digital marketing and website design, he was surprised, and he said, well, why aren't you helping us out with our digital presence, with our website? And like, I never wanted to be that guy, right? Like, because at the time, their digital footprint was horrendous. Like, the website was just so sparse. The best way to actually get information was to become a friend with Cornboy on Facebook. Like, that was literally the way this company conveyed most of their information, was Cornboy posting it, not even to the company page, but posting it to his own personal page on Facebook. So, but I never wanted to be that guy that was like, oh, you should hire me, you need my help. But they absolutely did need my help. And I started working part-time for them. I took over the website, I redesigned the website, and I started managing it, writing new content, just kind of keeping that going. And then over the course of a couple of years, my role got bigger and bigger. I started doing more and more with the studio, leading a lot of presentations and so forth. And then actually just over 3 years ago, that would have been, March 2022, I ended up joining the studio full-time in that role as director of sales and marketing. So I've worked with the company for about 6 years now, but the last 3 of them have been as a full-time member of the team.
It's always so
Very
interesting. Cool. We've interviewed, been doing this show now for 5 years, and I've interviewed people from all walks of life and different companies, and it's always so funny that, like, not funny, but cool, I guess, that the people who are passionate about any given thing, right? Mythic Legions, wrestling figures, G.I. Joe, whatever it is, right? Like, they always end up carving their way in somehow.
Yeah.
It's just funny how it works.
It's a very like shoot your shot kind of
Yeah.
industry in a way.
Yeah. And like I said, I never wanted to shoot my shot. Like because at the time I had a really good job. I was the director of marketing for an IT company here in Rhode Island. Loved the company I worked for. I'm not into technology. Like I worked with a bunch of like genuine technology guys, and I didn't care. Like Microsoft would drop like a new like package or update, and they'd get all super geeked out, and I was just like, I don't care at all. But I loved the company, and I loved the way we helped people, and I was excited about that. Like I was passionate about communicating the impact that we had for our clients. But collecting toys and everything has been something I've done for decades. I never imagined I would be in the toy industry. So when it happened, it really did catch me by surprise. But it's actually something that Four Horsemen Studios has done a number of times. Like if you look at our full-time roster these days, so many people started as fans or friends of the studio. Chris Gorich, who's our production manager, he used to work at NECA. He's worked at Jazzwares and everything. He started just doing like helping out the studio because he was already going over to China. So he was like, yeah, I'll look in on your production. I'll help you out. I'll do a little bit for you on the side. A couple of years later, he becomes the full-time production manager.
Yeah.
Nate Barch, the guy that does all of our artwork. If you've ever heard his story, he actually did a piece of fan art on a Motu message board. That the studio like saw, was like, hey, this is awesome. Do you want to do a packaging painting for us? Dude's now a full-time member of the team, does all of our packaging. So it's incredible how this studio has found talent out there within the fan base and made our company and our team that much stronger because of the way they've recruited and hired those people in.
Yeah. The other thing you talk about too is the worldwide reach and getting things like out there. I thought one of the coolest things about a year ago, I was in Europe, I was in England, and then ended up in Paris and walked into a comic shop, and I was like, oh. And then there was like Mythic Legions, and I'm like, oh, that's from where I'm from.
Yeah.
And it was really cool to see. Like, just blew my mind that it was like, yep, France knows what's up. Like,
dude, I get so geeked out. I went to Salem last Halloween, Salem, Massachusetts, not too far from where I am. And I walked, and they have a great comic shop over there. And I walked in, and they're not one of our retailers. So it's not like walking into like Zapp and, seeing them on the shelf and knowing they're going to be there because they're a retailer. But they had a handful of Legions at this comic shop in Salem. And, I get so geeked out. And I was like, I was taking pictures of them and sending them to our company chat. And I was like, look, guys, look. I mean, that's the kind of company we still are, right? Like, we're not this giant company that's in, major box stores all across the country where that doesn't excite us. Like, me walking into a comic shop in Salem generates me sending pictures to our entire company and being like, hey guys, look how cool this is. And all of the people, the owners and everyone commenting how neat that is, that I found some of our figures out in the wild.
Well, speaking of cool things, 2025 is a big year for the Horsemen, as it marks 10 years of Mythic Legions. What's it been like in your time, at Four Horsemen Studios, to see the line go from the crowdfund that you were a backer on to really where it is today?
I mean, it's been incredible. Like I said, I've been working for the company for 6 years now. So when I first came on board, it was a much different time. Like, there are certain waves that have come out in the line that are really game-changing waves. Beyithirr was one of them. So Beyithirr was one that was actually solicited in 2019, but didn't actually come out until I think it was late 2020, 2021. the bottom line was it was solicited before COVID and it came out after COVID. So by the time it came out, if you remember after COVID, that was like a crazy time for collecting, where everyone had tons of extra money that they had nothing to spend it on because they couldn't go anywhere. So a lot of people were pouring money into their collections. So Beyithirr hit, and it was such a game-changing wave. And that was a point where I was now working for the company. So I really feel like I came on board at a time where it was just poised to explode. And I got to see it really elevate to that next level. And then what we've done in the last few years since then is we've really tried to become so much more purposeful in what we're doing, where in those early days where the team was only, a couple members, there wasn't as much planning and strategy. But, now that we're not only offering Mythic Legions, but we've got Cosmic Legions, we've got Figure Obscura. 2025, we last year in Legions Con, actually, we announced Infinite Legions, which is a new line that we're going to be debuting this year. Legacies of Mythos, which is a subline of Mythic Legions. To be able to support that amount of product with a team as small as we have, everything needs to be carefully planned out. So it's been really cool to be a part of that and just to see the community grow. A huge part of what makes us a success is the way that we've embraced the fan community and they've embraced us in return. It's everyone always says we've got the best fans. That's not a surprise, a company saying that. But I would stack our fans up against anybody. They are such a inclusive, welcoming, warm group of people. If you come to Legions Con and you hang out and you see a group like that, it's evidence of how this group is different. So to be a part of this, and the toys are awesome. Like, I'm so proud of the toys that we are able to release. But when I think about the community we have and the stories that get shared with us about the impact that this line has had on people, it's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that firsthand at the different, like the NJ Toy Con and the events locally that we've been to, where when you guys have a table set up there, it's like people just happily wait in line, and the line ends up. And this is actually how I really first found out. I was at one of the toy shows, and I was there with a buddy, and I think Dave, you were there with me at this one, at the one in Parsippany, where we had a friend that like hopped on this line and we were like, what are you waiting? There's so much going on. What are you waiting in this line for? And he's like, oh, Legions. And like, we just started talking, and then like the line, we started absorbing more people into the line, and then we got to the front, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, I guess I'm going to get a couple of these, see what's going on. I've been waiting in this line for a half hour. So, but yeah, it was great. 'Cause it was just like having a great conversation, and then you get figures at the end of it. It was great.
We've had that. So I did a show in California earlier this year, and it was our first time in Southern California in quite some time. And our fan base came out, and there was a line of people. And as soon as they opened the doors, they were rushing over. And it was funny because the showrunner told me after the show, they had never seen anything like that, right? Like at a toy show where suddenly there's a line of people that all rush in and are walking out with boxes of figures. And one of the other vendors said to the showrunner, are they giving away toys? He laughed and he said, no, they're selling toys. And they were stunned. Like they had never seen anything like that kind of fan interaction. And we have that happen to us at shows all the time, where people see a line and they see the energy and they're like, I don't know what this is, but I need some. Like, this is clearly hot. I mean, as toy collectors, right? When something's hot, we want to know, what are we missing?
Exactly.
Like, am I missing out on something? Do I need to jump on this? And I always say that as the director of sales and marketing, one of the things that makes my job easier is I don't need to create super fans. I just need to get people to buy a couple of our figures, one, maybe two figures, because I've seen it time and time again. So many people, because this is an original IP. We don't have a comic book or a movie or a cartoon or, something that people have seen. There's no nostalgia play here where they're like, oh, I want that because I love Star Wars and I grew up with it, or I just saw the new Marvel movie and I want that character. Our figures there's a story there, but first and foremost, they are toys. So when you see people pick it up and they're like, oh, I've heard of these before, but I never picked one up because I didn't know what they were about. Once they get it and they start playing with them and they're like, these things are awesome. Is this what I've been missing all this time? I cannot tell you the amount of testimonials I've seen that people will say, I picked up my first Legions, 6 months ago. I'm now 200 deep, which is insane, but it happens time and time again.
So I'm going to use this as a perfect segue because those two, I bought two. And I bought, it was Magnus.
Ooh, it's a good one.
Gold armor.
Yep.
And it was just like a Black Knight. It actually looked like the Black Knight from Monty Python. That's why I bought it.
That's probably the Black Knight Legion builder.
Yeah. So I bought those two, and I was like, oh, these are really cool. Like, I'm not the biggest like sword and sorcery guy personally, but I was like, I get it. I understand it. Shortly thereafter, though, you guys went and announced what is I would pull it out right now, but it's like nestled in a good spot, and I'm worried it will cascade if I try to pull it out. But I very soon after that bought what I would consider in my collection to be literally my favorite singular piece in my entire collection of everything that I have.
Can confirm.
Which is my favorite fictional character from anything ever, the Headless Horseman. So some of my favorite pieces, and I think I could speak for Dave too, has been from that figure Obscura line, because while I'm not a big sword and sorcery guy, I'm a huge Christmas Carol guy. I'm a huge Headless Horseman guy. Mask of the Red Death. All of that stuff is like, that speaks to me. And having had my hands on two Mythic Legions figures prior to that, it's like, oh, when you announced these, I then knew like what to expect in terms of like, delivery. But how do you guys, like, it's such a hard right from what you're doing with Mythic Legions to Figure Obscura. How do you select what you're going to do with that line?
I love Figure Obscura. Figure Obscura has become such an important part of our company. It is very much a gateway for us because you got a couple Legions first and then you picked up Figure Obscura. But what we see is a lot of people go the opposite way where, Legions look cool, but I don't know what they are. But the Headless Horseman, I know what that is. That's a great piece. I can display that at Halloween. They buy that, and then now they understand Legions. So Figure Obscura started because, our owner, Jim, wanted to do a holiday figure. And they were like, hey, we could probably do something pretty cool with our existing parts and just a few extra pieces. So Krampus and the Headless Horseman were the first two that were designed. And if you look at the Headless Horseman and our library of parts, there's very little new on that figure. The pumpkin head is brand new. The severed neck is brand new. The hand that has got the peg that holds the pumpkin. Those are the only, and the collar. Those are the only new parts.
I'm looking at it and smiling, by the way.
So early on, the idea with Figure Obscura was a couple new parts. The rest of it is existing library, and we get to do a holiday figure. But the reality was Figure Obscura took off and became such a popular line for us that it gave us the ability to invest more heavily into it. And then if you see a figure like Sun Wukong, the Monkey King, that is almost a head-to-toe new figure. We have Frankenstein that came out the past year, Frankenstein's Creature. It was a head-to-toe new figure. Like, there was no parts reuse in it. It was completely brand new. So the way that we select what gets done, it is genuinely so pure. It's what Eric is inspired to do. He once said to me that if I ever have to force myself to do a Figure Obscura, we're doing it wrong and I'm not doing it. So we have deadlines. We have things that we have to do. We've got to keep the Mythic line running. We've got to keep the Cosmic line running. Figure Obscura is his breath of fresh air. It's his palate cleanser. We have a list of potential figures we want to do for Figure Obscura. Everything on that list would be awesome, but not everything is right at specific times. So we're very careful about which ones we select at which times based on other stuff we're doing, based on the parts that we may have coming that we can reuse. But at the end of the day, the number one criteria is, what is Eric inspired to do? He did, again, Sun Wukong, the Monkey King, because it's a figure he had always wanted to do.
Yeah.
Eric has sculpted for so many different companies. He's done so many. He's sculpted from Star Wars and obviously Masters of the Universe and Turtles and Nightmare Before Christmas. His resume is incredible. So the fact that there are still characters he's never had a chance to sculpt that he really wants to approach, that is one of the things that we get to do with Figure Obscura. And you mentioned you're a big Christmas Carol guy. As am I. Christmas Carol is possibly my all-time favorite story. And those figures, the Jacob Marley was an absolute labor of love for me specifically.
Oh my God. What a
great figure.
What an execution. And I love as much as it's like a love-hate relationship with the Cadence, because like I would love to have them all display, like, because I see the direction, like, which way we're going with them, but like I would love, I can't wait 3 years from now to have them all together, and I'm super excited.
He can't wait, and he can't wait.
The other thing is, if you could inspire Eric, sprinkle a little inspiration on him, Ichabod Crane, man, to go with our horseman.
So we talked about it. So one of the challenges with a character like Ichabod Crane is it's a great character. It would be awesome for the display, but it's not the most exciting toy. And that's one of the challenges that we have is, like, even when we do a character like Ghost of Christmas Past, we do get some blowback from certain people that are like, it's not fighty enough. A character that doesn't have weapons, in the Ghost of Christmas Past, like, we made her straight up creepy. Like,
oh yeah, you did.
The bonus head is very, very ghoulish and everything.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things that we always look at as well, is because there's a ton of characters, and this is also, going back to Mythic Legions, we've had people request like villagers in Mythic Legions.
Yeah.
And I'm probably the most vocal person that says, I don't want villagers. And whenever I have this conversation, I'm like, okay, name me the villagers you want. Everyone always starts with the blacksmith. And I'm like, stop the blacksmith. Yes, the blacksmith is cool. After that, where are you going?
Yeah.
Do you want a baker? Like, do you want a miller? Like, are you really excited for a miller action figure?
Well, yeah, you do the baker, you do the candlestick maker. You do
So my point is that I get why people want those types of figures, but their appeal is very limited. Eric has told this story before, that when he was doing a lot of work for Mattel, when the Horsemen were, all these people would ask for, like, when are you going to do Alfred? Like, they wanted all of those figures to build out the full display. Dude, Alfred doesn't sell the way that Batman and Joker and all of those more dynamic, visually exciting characters do. So at the end of the day, Figure Obscura is a passion project for us, but there's also a business reality that we have to kind of say, like, okay, will we be able to actually move enough units of that to justify doing it?
See, the good thing about Ichabod is it gives you a way to get the horse, like another horse, back out there, and that could be a selling point too for a lot of people, just to be able to get another horse. Sure. And you give him like a crazy scared face or something like that. And
just think of all like the rad regional like mythical monsters.
Oh yeah, Jersey Devil,
the Jersey Devils, and
we're in New Jersey.
Bigfoot. And
cryptozoology is something we haven't touched on in the line, but right from the beginning, where we talked about what Figura was, we said folklore, literature, mythology, cryptozoology. So it was in the mix of the types of characters, because at the end of the day, what we're pulling from is stuff that's in the public domain, like Legend of Sleepy Hollow and Christmas Carol, or stuff that kind of falls outside of having copyright. You know, a lot of the cryptozoology stuff, nobody has a copyright on that. So a lot of that stuff, mythology, you know, we did the gods of ancient Egypt and stuff. Nobody has a copyright on Anubis. So
yeah,
all of that stuff is totally fair game. And that's one of the fun things to do with the line as well. Like, so a couple years ago, we did Monkey King, Mask of the Red Death, and Jacob Marley all in 1 year, and didn't intentionally do literature. Like, there was no point that we said, let's really focus on literature this year. It just, those were the characters that happened to get done. But when we followed up, we realized, oh, we did a lot of literature last year. Let's make sure that we don't do that this year. Let's make sure we mix in some other stuff. And that's one of the reasons why the gods of ancient Egypt were done, because it was something that was unexpected and different, and not just another piece, another character from popular literature.
Yeah, it makes plenty of sense. So let's talk about the crowdfund, Beyithirr. So 10 years in, we're tackling, the Four Horsemen Studios are tackling the dragon that is a dream project for many fans. Why was now the right time?
Well, I mean, we're at the point now where we've got enough fan support. We've got enough of a customer base built up, and the studio's, you know, able to realistically do something like this. I mean, if you look at our early Mythic Legions figures and compare them to what we're doing these days, you can obviously see that we've learned along the way. I mean, digital sculpting is one of the biggest changes that have been introduced in the Mythic Legions line through that 10-year life cycle. So everything just kind of converged at this point, with it being the 10-year anniversary, to say, like, hey, we think we've got the fan support to be able to realistically produce something like this and get the market support. But also, it's the kind of thing that Eric was ready to sit down and sculpt. I mean, one of the amazing things about this figure, so I said that digital sculpting is something that's been introduced into the line. Eric started life back at McFarlane Toys as a traditional sculptor. So everything was being sculpted in clay. And he did that with Mythic Legions as well. The first wave of Mythic Legions, all of those figures were sculpted traditionally. It wasn't until like Advent of Decay that some of those figures started being done digitally. What's interesting with Eric is, even though he sculpts totally digitally these days, he still has the habits and like the learned skill set for being a traditional sculptor. So a lot of purely digital sculptors who learn digital, they probably would have used something like a pattern stamp or something on the dragon to do all those scales. Eric sculpted every single scale on Beyithirr individually, which is absolutely insane. The fact that, I mean, when there is so much surface area on this thing, and every single piece of this, Eric went in and sculpted them. There's a great documentary that Bradley Treadaway, who's another full-time member of the studio, we released a great documentary called Birth of the Dragon. There's a number of scenes of Eric at his workstation sculpting, and just seeing him like flesh out one of those scales and imagining that he did that for every single scale on this dragon gives you a sense of the scope of this project and what really went into its creation.
So, you know, this is obviously quite the undertaking. And the project itself is structured a little differently than some of the other kind of big items we've seen from other toy companies. How did you determine how Beyithirr would be offered?
Well, originally, we were just going to put them up as a regular pre-order. I mean, Kickstarter has an important role in the Mythic Legions line. The first wave was crowdfunded through Kickstarter. The biggest at the time, I mean, the biggest Legions wave that ever has happened is Advent of Decay at 43 figures. But at the time, that was a big investment as well, because it was all the what we call the 2.0 figures, the females and the elves, the goblins, the thinner ones. But we have not had to use crowdfunding for any of the waves since then. The fan support has been there. But we had intended to just put Beyithirr out as a regular pre-order. But when we got the pricing back from the factory, we realized we had dramatically underestimated the costs on this. Cornboy has said this recently, and I've been repeating it on a lot of interviews I've done, that he basically said, we made a thing without realizing how expensive it was going to be to make that thing. And that's the truth of it, is when we got the prices back from the factory, we were so surprised that we knew that it would be irresponsible for our company to just say, plunge forward, let's just make this thing and hope for the best. We want to still be making toys many years to come. We don't want Beyithirr, as awesome as he is, to burn down our company. So we said, you know what? It's probably fitting that 10 years in, we're going back to square one, and we're going to do a crowdfund. Let's put Beyithirr up. We're going to set a minimum funding goal. We're going to set some thresholds to make sure that before we take this leap, that the demand is out there, that the sales are out there to support doing this. We did consider using Kickstarter. Kickstarter offered a number of benefits, including, exposure. But the downside to Kickstarter is that it costs a lot more money. We had to get a certain amount of money to sell Beyithirr. This is a math problem, right? At the end of the day, we have a certain unit cost. We've got to charge a certain amount to make this viable. If we went with a platform like Kickstarter, we'd have to charge more. And this already being such an expensive figure, we were very much focused on, we want to keep it as affordable as possible. I know calling a $550 dragon affordable may be a bit of a stretch, but it's better than a $600 dragon or a $650. So that was kind of our approach, and why we said, let's just sell it on our website. We also sell gift cards on our website, and we knew a lot of people had been stockpiling them and asking them for gifts specifically so they could apply it to the dragon. So that was another benefit of keeping it in-house. And ultimately, just having it on a platform that we can control and that gives us the flexibility we need to make sure that we're properly meeting our fans' needs for this particular figure.
So, in kind of like a quick rundown of the actual offering here, and just kind of going through the different tiers, as we're going to do here in just a moment, I think one of the things that stood out to a lot of people was, the difference between kind of like tiers and add-ons, right? Mm-hmm. So was it really just kind of determined again by the size and the production cost, just in terms of the head and the alt head and the alt wings and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, the wings and the if you look at like the add-on pieces, the wing and the neck and everything, it's like half of the dragon. Like half of the dragon size is in that the neck part and everything that comes off in those gigantic wings. So when we got the prices for that, I've seen a lot of people say like, oh, you should have added them as stretch goals. We couldn't. Like, they're too expensive. We can't add a stretch goal that costs that amount of money. We could, but it would unlock it 10,000 units sold or something like that. It would be a really, really high number. So for us, we said, hey, we had shown all that stuff at Legions Con. We had shown 2 dragons, the standard build and the add-on. For a minute, we toyed about not selling the add-ons. We were like, hey, because we knew we were going to get some blowback from people saying like, oh, the dragon is $850. No, the dragon is $550. He comes with a neck. He comes with a head. He comes with wings. But if you want additional pieces, extra pieces, that is the add-on. I heard someone compare it to like buying a car, right? You can buy a car and it's a fully functional vehicle, but if you want to upgrade with the spoiler and the sound system and the tinted windows and the special wheels or whatever, I'm not a car guy, so I think
neither am I.
Same.
I think that's what people spend money on, But the point being is the car works fine without those things. But if those things are important to you, you can get them. You just have to pay more. And that's the way that we approach the add-on sets. Is we knew that if we didn't offer them, people that had seen them at Legions Con that really wanted them would be upset. But if we threw them all in the package, it would have been $850. And we didn't want to say, okay, the price of admission is $850. We wanted to say, okay, the price of admission is $550, and we're going to give you some options. If you want these other pieces, you can certainly buy them. But that's why we also added figures to those sets, because we knew that we could add some really cool figures to those pieces that didn't add a ton of cost for us, but added a ton of value to the package. So, it's all about like perception, is wanting to make sure that people feel like they're getting their money's worth. If they're just buying the wings or they're just buying that, fire breathing head, that's super cool. But if we also throw in a figure that's not going to be sold elsewhere, that's not sold individually, there's that extra value that's added. And, ultimately we looked at all these different options and landed on this one as being the best way to at least get this out there and give fans the ability to buy what's important to them.
Well, the good news is that that fiery breath add-on fully funded. So at the very least, you're getting the Burning Knight and a really cool wall mountable dragon head that can breathe fire on it. So, but you guys are also really close on the number for the actual dragon. You're in like, I think the last time I looked, or last time you guys posted, you were up past 1,700, right? So.
Yeah, we were over 1,800 today.
Over 1,800. So yeah.
I think we're at 91% funded as of this morning, and obviously we've had orders that came in today. So I hesitate to say this is absolutely going to fund, but it's at the point now where it's going to fund. We're less than halfway through the campaign. It's over 90%, and let's be honest. Most crowdfunding campaigns, you don't pay until the end of the campaign. Because we're using our regular store, we don't have the ability to do that. So this is a campaign that you pay up front, like when you order, you pay. There's no incentive to do it early other than bragging rights, other than saying, there are people that are like, I was a day one Beyithirr backer. Like that's important to them. And it makes me so happy because it's proof that we've built this relationship. Like it's so crazy. And it sounds so disingenuous in this day and age to say that, like, we as a company, that people have a personal relationship with us, but they do. Like, they know me, like they know George, they know Chris and Eric and Cornboy and Diego and Joe, all of us. When they go see us at shows, we interact with them all the time, and conversations we've had continue in person. How many companies do you buy from regularly that you can say that you know the people that work there, and when you see them, a conversation that you've been having online immediately translates into in person? So these people want to support this project, not only because it's badass, but because they're like, hey, these are people I consider friends, and they're doing something amazing. I want to support it. But that all being said, at the end of the day, it's a lot of money to drop before you have to. So we know that, like every campaign, we're going to get a flurry of orders that final weekend. People who are waiting right to the end. All of our pre-orders do this as well. People wait right to that very end. We have people that they think it's fun. They're almost playing chicken with the pre-order, and they try to wait until the last, like the pre-order ends at 11. They put their order in at 10:59 every single time. They get some kind of thrill. So thinking about all of that, being over 90% funded with everything I've just said is nothing short of amazing. This dragon is absolutely going to fund.
And the other thing too is you announced that in terms of the additional goals, the Green Knight, Sir Bengar has been added to the base level. So when and I this is always Dave's thing. We are not an
we are a when podcast.
We are not an if podcast. We are a when podcast.
Yep.
When it funds.
I love it.
every backer will get a Sir Benegar.
Yeah, and we made that decision. So I've said before that the way we approach stretch goals for this was we have a certain unit cost, right? When we hit higher numbers, like when we are going to produce more, our unit cost comes down a little bit because the more you make, it gets a little bit cheaper. So our approach was like, hey, if we don't add anything to this, the higher we sell, the more profit we make per dragon. That wasn't our goal. So we said, okay, if we get a price break and our unit cost comes down, let's add something back into the package that's equivalent to the savings we just got. So it brings our unit cost right back to where we were. We're now making the same amount of money on that dragon sale as we were before, but we've just added more value for the buyer. So now instead of paying $550 for the dragon, they're paying $550 for the dragon and the knight, or the dragon and the knight and the skeleton. That's the way we approach stretch goals on this campaign. The reason we added Sir Benegar early is not because we suddenly found some savings. It's because we said, you know what? We're in that period where all campaigns slump. We don't want this to be something that just trails on towards that final weekend. We want to get to those stretch goals earlier. We saw a lot of people saying, I really want to back this, but I'm going to wait until Sir Benegar is unlocked. So we took a risk, we took a chance, and we bet on our fans. And we said, you know what? We're going to open this up early because at the end of the day, if we get to where we need to get to in the end, whether we opened it up early or unlocked it where we originally said is not going to matter. You're coming to the same destination. You're just getting there a little bit differently. So that's what we did. We said, you know what? Okay, we'll take a little bit of a hit here temporarily, because we're going to bet on our fans that they're not going to stop at 2,000. This figure would have been unlocked at 2,500 units. Now he's going to be part of the package at 2,000. And we took all the other stretch goals and just moved them down a little bit. So that's what we're doing here is we're rethinking how we're doing it, betting on the fans that this is going to help them have even more excitement for the package.
Right on. Now, for those of us who didn't see it at any of the cons, and for everybody who did, they kind of got to take a grasp of how big Beyithirr is. How did everybody land on the size as far as like production and how big it could be? And I think this picture is perfect. That and the one with the boxes, just to see it in scale with other stuff is just kind of shows you're getting like a $550 dragon for sure. But how did the size become the size?
So that's a funny story. So we actually printed a really little one first. So this thing is so gigantic that the print times on it and the amount of resin are unprecedented. So we printed really small versions of them just so we could make sure that the fit and the articulation and everything made sense. But when we finally nailed that, locked that in, then we printed up the dragon and it was huge. Like we had that dragon head. I remember I was in the studio, we had the dragon head and it was gigantic until we put it up against some of our other figures, namely a horse. We put the dragon head as big as it was against a horse and it didn't feel big enough. Like as huge as it was, we were like, this is not going to be the overall scale that we want. Like we didn't want when you put the dragon next to a horse, it just be a little bit bigger. We've absolutely seen some people that wish Beyithirr was a little smaller, but at the end of the day, this is like a god level character in our mythology. Dragons are an absolute presence. It needed to have that sense of oomph in it. It needed to have that size. So we all looked at it and we said, let's do a couple more prints. Let's print it 10% bigger. Let's print it 20% bigger. That's the great thing about digital, right? Is you can print it at any size that you want. Once you have that digital file, you can just print it. So we did all of that. A few days later, those prints were ready and everyone in the studio looked at the sizes and unanimously, every one of us said 20%. That's the one right there. Because it had the size we wanted. Like, again, relative to some of our other bigger characters like the horses and the trolls, the smaller sizes, it just didn't have the kind of power that we needed for this dragon.
Yeah, and I mean, looking at this, this picture for those of us that are watching on YouTube, as much as before I just said I'm not a huge sword and sorcery fan. I loved the film Dragonheart. That was like I loved when that came out. And looking at the size of these, of these 110 and 112 scale figures standing next to, it looks like the right size for a dragon.
Yeah.
And this particular photo got a ton of reaction because we had shared, actually back when we first debuted it at Legions Con around that time, we shared a photo of the dragon with some of our figures. But if you know Legions, that was impressive. But if you don't know the size of Legions figures intimately, there was no context there.
Correct.
So by displaying this with a variety of other lines, which, by the way, these were all just things that were lying around the office. Like, literally, the call went out and we were like, hey, we need figures. Everyone, what do you have on your desk right now that we could put into this photo? And that's where all this stuff came from. It's all stuff that is in our actual collections at the studio in one form or another. But if you look at this, you got Black Series, you got Classified, you got Marvel Legends. We even threw some fun stuff in there, the California Raisin and the Glyos and everything. It gives you context. And this was the photo that I think a lot of people that had seen like the real sexy shots that we had done and were like, wow, that looks really cool. Seeing this photo and having that context made them realize, oh, wow, that thing is absolutely massive.
Yeah, Trevor's shouts to at 16 shooter on Instagram. Trevor's photos made it look beautiful. These photos made it look massive.
Yeah, that was when I remember we were first talking about it. I was like, I'm having trouble figuring out like how big this is.
Yeah, because we haven't seen it. We have not had the opportunity to see it in person ourselves, and we have friends that have conveyed its size and to us, but seeing this picture really kind of drove it home.
To me, because this definitely shows the size, and the size is what everyone's talking about. I will go on record saying right now that when people get this in hand, it's going to be the detail that everyone is talking about, because there have been so many large scale like pieces that have come out recently, right? Like, the Cat's Lair or the Hiss Tank or, the Sentinel and everything. And, I have a bunch of those. I don't have the Cat's Lair. I have the Hiss Tank. I have the Sentinel. I have Galactus. I love those figures. I think they're great figures. But it's a hard comparison to compare those to Beyithirr. The Hiss Tank is a lot of black plastic, which is exactly what it needed to be. Like, there's nothing I'm saying they should have done differently there. But you look at a figure like Beyithirr, and while sculpturally it's incredibly impressive, this thing is covered in paint. Every inch of this gigantic, there's no unpainted plastic. We didn't just do like some green plastic and do a little bit of dry brushing or highlights on it. Every single piece of this is highly, highly painted and detailed. I really do believe that when this arrives in fans' hands, that's what's going to be like the blow in their mind type element, is going to be just the amount of detail that the factory was able to pour into this thing.
So before we say goodnight to the dragon and answer a couple of fan questions here that were submitted, remind our listeners, and we'll do this again at the end as well, but remind our listeners, our watchers, where can they back Beyithirr, and until when do they have to do so?
So this figure is going to be offered exclusively at storehorseman.com. Even though we do have a robust retailer community, as I mentioned earlier, we priced this as low as we possibly could go to get it made. If we're pricing it as low as we could go, that means I don't have lower to go for wholesale prices for retailers. So This is only going to be available from us directly at Four Horsemen, and the pre-order ends on April 6th, which is a Sunday, April 6th at 11 p.m. Eastern.
All right. So as I mentioned, we do have a couple of questions here from that were submitted. As is always the case, we know that your time is valuable. You can't be everywhere all at once. Even though, as we've mentioned multiple times on this episode, that how connected you are with the community, we still want to make sure that we give our followers, our listeners, a chance to ask questions when we have guests on. Dave, before we hop into those questions, please remind everyone how can they participate in future episodes of the show.
Yeah, so if you follow us at AIC_podcast.com, and for those of you watching, I'm looking into the camera, so that way we're having a moment. So you follow us at AIC_podcast.com. Usually the weekend before we record, there'll be an announcement. Like this past weekend, Jeremy's going to be on our show this week. If you have any questions, you can tap on the field, send it, and you could be one of the featured questions that we ask on the episode. And then, of course, you can watch, you can listen on all your favorite podcast locales. Your favorite of choice is our favorite for you to listen on. And, go to our YouTube and watch it because, I got a cool haircut, so take a look.
And we do pictures and stuff now.
Yeah, we do pictures now. So that's at AIC_podcast as well.
Yep. So from our Instagram, from those submitted questions, we have selected 2 featured questions. So Dave, would you like to handle the first one here?
Yes, and thank you for having an easy handle. At Mr_Zen asks, if Beyithirr funds, are there plans for more dragons in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the nature of toy making is once you invest in those steel molds, which are wildly expensive, especially for a figure like Beyithirr, you want to get more squeeze out of that. That's what the Legions line has been built on all these years, right? Is a smart reuse of parts. Now, we can't get as many uses out of the dragon parts as we do, say, a new torso or a new set of legs or something like that. But if we get this funded, or I should say, when we get this funded, because this is a when podcast, when we get this funded and these pieces are all made, we absolutely will reuse them. What we won't do is reissue Beyithirr or use these parts in this exact configuration again. When we do other dragons in the future, there will be, not only new colors, but new additions as well. We're not just going to take Beyithirr, paint it a different color, give it a different name, and call it a day. We will use the parts that we can reuse and add new parts where appropriate.
All right, awesome. So there you go.
Very
so
cool.
if 135-pound plus dragon is, you're ready for a second one. That's
if you want a dragon fight.
That's I literally cannot wait, because real estate is a problem for me in terms of display. I cannot wait to see where people put this.
Yeah, I am very much going to be living vicariously through others, but I am stoked for everyone.
I cannot wait. As I was saying to a friend of mine, it's like getting a plastic version of a toddler. So just make sure that your shelves are they're hardy. You got to make sure they're really in there. So our second and final question from the fan submissions here comes from at Jersey Maniac. With some waves, so this is a question not directly related to the dragon.
Sure.
With some waves taking 2 years to arrive, is anything being done to prevent delays moving forward? For example, tooling being completed before waves are initially shown to us.
Yeah, we're constantly trying to shorten that window from pre-order to delivery. And in the last few years, because there was a point that everything we did was pre-order. in the last few years, if you look at the amount of in-stock items we've been able to do, obviously we talked about Figure Obscura. All of those are surprise in-stock drops. We've done things like at Legions Con where we had the Valiant Knight figure a few years ago and the Ninian Infantry, the Snake Man. Right now, we had this touring figure we debuted at ZoloCon a few weeks ago called the Legendary Barbarian. These are all things that were fully tooled, ready to go. We ordered a number and did it as an in-stock. So we are doing a lot more of that. But the pre-order model is still an important part of what we're doing. The problem with the idea of, oh, you guys should just like catch up. I can do that if I don't offer pre-orders for 2 years. Like if I just pump the brakes and say, okay, you know what? Instead of offering any pre-orders, we are going to only offer things that are already tooled or whatever, which, if we do that, people are like, oh, these are all reuse. We want new parts. It's not an easy solution. We're trying to find that balance. We have been sending stuff to the factories a lot earlier than we used to. At the end of the day, toy making is an incredibly complex process. And we admittedly do not make it easy on ourselves. You look at what a lot of other toy lines do, especially a lot of independent toy lines, right? And when they do a new wave, it's typically like $1. It's like one body that they reuse in a bunch of different and cool creative ways. I wish that we could do that sometimes. I look at a wave like, Rising Suns. So Rising Suns, we sold that for pre-order a couple years ago. It's not this past November, the one before. That's something that's in pre-production now. That wave had a new Barbarian build in it. It had new parts for our female figures. It had a whole suite of new parts for dwarves. It had new female parts in it. It had new ogre parts, and it had a bear, a full-size bear. That's a lot of different things that have to get tooled and have to get debugged. If any one of them causes a delay, the entire wave is delayed. So that's part of the challenge is we can do things faster. They're not going to be as cool. And that's kind of the approach we've always had. And we have a lot of our fans that say, you know what? I love the stuff to come out quicker. The waiting definitely is not ideal, but I would rather wait a little longer and get the quality that we get and get the variety that we get than get stuff more frequently, but it's just not as cool. So yes, to go back to answer the question a little more succinctly, yes, we are constantly trying to find ways to shorten that window. But at the same time, we want to stay true to who we are and what we're producing. And we produce some very complex products.
All right. And that is our two community questions.
Did it. We got there.
Jeremy, you survived the 2-question gauntlet.
No problem.
So before we let you go and plug Beyithirr one more time, we do have a tradition here on the show. We have a final question that we ask all of our guests. And it's been a while since we've gotten to use the original question. We've had a lot of returning guests, so Dave's gonna have to dust off the vocal cords for this one. But Dave, would you like to?
I do the impression either way.
Yeah. Would you like to fulfill your role as this podcast's James Lipton and ask our final question?
Why, yes, I would. Our final question that we ask all of our guests: what is your strangest and or favorite piece in your collection? It can be one of each, or it can be both.
So I've been thinking about this question. I realize I don't really have anything truly strange in my collection, which is funny because my friend George, who works at the studio, he's our project manager. I was thinking about his collection, and everything in his collection is bizarre. Like, dude just has a lot of weird stuff in his office. And I was looking at my collection and I'm like, man, I don't have anything that's truly weird. So unfortunately, I don't have like a really cool item that I'm like, oh, this is super bizarre and unexpected. But I do have something that I can talk about being something I love, and that's really important to me. I mentioned earlier that I got started customizing Mythic Legions very early. And back during that period, being one of the original Legions customizers, really the only thing that we could do was use like other toy lines, right? Like I used a lot of Masters Classics heads and parts like that, and a lot of Toy Biz Lord of the Rings figures, and combine those parts. But after a few years, the rise of 3D printed parts started to enter the Legions world. And we started seeing people that if a part didn't exist, they found a way to get it out there to 3D print it. And there was a point where I really wanted to create a fox character. I love the anthropomorphic characters. I really wanted to create a fox. And I looked for, different fox heads. I even looked at, at like a lot of gift stores and stuff, the Schleich little animals.
Yeah.
I was trying to find a fox like that I could like cut the head off and use. Couldn't find anything. And then I got a 3D artist named Walter DeMarco, goes by Mass Customs, that reached out to me and said, hey, I love your customizing. I'm a 3D printer, a 3D sculptor. I'd love to work with you someday. And I was like, oh, just so happens I'm trying to do a fox head right now. And he said, absolutely, I would love to do that for you. So he did that for me, but then I had to find someone to print it. And I ended up meeting a gentleman named Len LaGuardia. He runs a company called Wolf King Customs. And at the time, Wolf King Customs didn't exist. He was just a dude that was doing some 3D printing for fun. And I got connected to Len and said, hey, do you want to print this for me? And he said, absolutely, I'd be happy to. And after he did, he said, I'd really like to start selling 3D printed parts. Do you mind if I sell this piece? And that started not only a friendship, that Len is one of my dearest friends these days, but it started his company. Like, this is his full-time job. He has a full-time job just doing 3D printed parts and custom pieces and stuff for Legions. And that fox head, which I still have my original Kitsune Fox Samurai custom, it's one of my treasured pieces because it was the first custom piece I helped develop. I've helped develop hundreds of them since then. It started a friendship. So many people in the Legions community now have their versions of that fox head in their collection. The character even is going to appear in the Mythic Legions video game. They actually brought the Kitsune character. So I look at that, and there's so many different layers of what started as me just being like, yeah, man, I want a fox character. I just think that'd be cool to have a Kitsune Fox Samurai. And I look at the company it helped start. I look at the friendships it's helped forge. And I just look at, everyone that now has one of those on their collection, in their Legions collection. And for that reason, that would be probably the most special piece in my display.
Dude, what a great bookend story.
Great story. Yeah.
I love that. That is a great answer. And what a perfect way to bookend this conversation. As somebody who started customizing and is now helping bring this dragon to life and has helped bring a lot of happiness to a lot of collectors. So
worldwide.
Yeah, Jeremy, it was an absolute pleasure chatting with you tonight. Before we let you go, one more time, where can everybody back Beyithirr, and when do they have until they can do it?
Well, thank you very much for having me tonight. And to back the Beyithirr Dragon, you can get that exclusively at storehorseman.com. You have until Sunday, April 6th at 11 p.m. Eastern to back Beyithirr and the add-on sets. The sooner you get it and do that, the quicker we get to those stretch goal tiers so we can add other cool stuff into those packages. All of that stuff is added at no additional cost. So the more that we sell, the cooler we make the overall package that you're getting. Once again, that's at storehorseman.com until Sunday, April 6th.
Awesome. Jeremy, thank you so much. Dave. send us home.
All right, let's get another toy made, everybody.